because Sarah can't join, okay? Okay, so Ria, so you've made a really good point. It doesn't have lots of alveoli compared to humans. You're right. So remember, it doesn't have alveoli at the end, does it? It goes straight to the muscle, doesn't it? So remember we have the tracheoles. Okay, we do have bronchioles. So Zarine, insects and non-mobile species. Yeah, good point. Okay, so they don't use much energy, do they, the insects? Would say they are mobile, but they're not, and smaller metabolic rate. Yeah, great. But the point I'm trying to make is we already know how the insects get their oxygen. They get them through the spiracles, remember, the little gaps in the waxy exoskeleton. Okay, down the trachea, down the tracheoles, straight to the muscles. Therefore, they're not relying on the circulatory system to get oxygen, are they? The oxygen doesn't diffuse into their blood and then it gets delivered by this system. It's going straight to the muscles. So their circulatory system and respiratory system, if you want to say it like that, is completely separate. It's not like humans, okay? And it's not like fish either, where the blood gets oxygenated, okay? So in insects, the blood doesn't get oxygenated, the muscles get directly oxygenated. Remember that, guys, it doesn't end in the alveoli, their respiratory system, it ends in a muscle, okay? So insects can use this system that's not quite as efficient because they're not relying on it for their oxygen transportation, okay? All they're really relying on it for it is to get glucose to their muscles and things like that, okay? And to remove waste products, all right? So we don't need it for oxygen. So that's why they can use this open system that's not quite as efficient compared to humans that need it for their oxygen transportation. So they need that closed system. Okay. Ria, what's a hemocell? Okay, we'll go over that in a minute. So the hemocell, that's at the body cavity. Let me write some key words. We've not quite finished explaining this yet. Just trying to do. Okay, so we've talked about that we've got the hemolymph. Let me make sure I'm spelling it right. Okay, so the hemolymph, so that's our blood. Okay, and you might come across the hemocell. Oh, okay. So hemocell is just a fancy way of saying body cavity, what is at the bottom here. So hemolymph is your blood and your hemocell is your body cavity. So it's easy to remember if you remember that blood is hemolymph. And you think, where's your hemolymph contained? It's within your hemocell. I'm probably saying that wrong, by the way, guys, but I'll just say hemocell. Okay, so we need to know a little bit more. We've not done all the detail just yet. So let me get my. Oh, sorry, guys. 1 second. Okay. What's the function of body cavity? Let's go over and we'll do all your questions. Okay. 1 second. Let me get the. So the body cavity just contains. It's just a containment, really. Your body cavity is just your body. A cavity is just an empty vessel, kind of, and then we contain it within that. Okay, great. So anyway, let's go back to the start. So we've got this dorsal vessel at the top here, okay? And this contains our hemolymph, okay? Then we've got a heart, obviously, within our insects, and that pumps, okay, your hemolymph into this vessel, okay? So we want to try and get as much hemolymph into this dorsal vessel as we can, okay? Then what happens is it just comes out of our dorsal vessel into our body cavity or our hemocell, what we want to call it, okay? So what happens is then we get all the exchange with our organs. So remember, this isn't the exchange of oxygen because we've already done that in our respiratory system, okay? This is just the exchange of waste products, glucose, things like that, okay? So things the insect needs as well, but they need oxygen quite readily, don't they? Okay. But now we're just left with loads of hemolymph in our body cavity, and we can't really have that, okay? So it needs to re-enter the heart in some way, okay? So we need to try and sort that out. Does anyone know how we prevent something backflowing? We have learned about it a little bit. So we want something to go back into the heart, but we want to stop it coming out. So we learnt about it. So Ari's put our answer here, but we learnt about it when we did about fish and how we get, yeah, Zaroween's put it as well. When we were getting oxygen in to our fish. Does anyone know it begins with a V? Any clues? If everyone could write it in the chat. Got 2 answers so far. Give everyone a second if anyone else knows. So it's valves, okay? So valves allow things to go in one way, but they prevent it coming back. And we're going to do the heart in a second, so we'll do a little bit more about valves, okay? So how it just happens is as the insect moves, it moves this hemolymph around the body cavity, and it just enters the heart by chance, okay? But it can't come back out, okay? So eventually all the hemolymph goes back into the heart, okay? So it's not very efficient at all, okay? So that's why humans can't use it, but insects can because they don't rely on it for their oxygen, okay? That's an important part to make. Okay, so that's our open and closed circulatory system. That's the difference between them, okay? So you've got these fancy words. So remember, hemolymph, that's your blood. Hemocell, that's just the way for your body cavity. And your long vessel at the top is called your dorsal vessel. Okay, so your main things we need to know. We'll see if we can get a question on it as well, because there's some new keywords, isn't it? Okay. Okay, right. Let's move on, guys, to learning a little bit about blood vessels. Okay. So has everyone heard of our 3 main blood vessels that we've got on here? Has everyone heard? I think you guys may have done them in GCSE, am I right? A little bit about arteries. No, seems from shaking of heads. Okay, we haven't. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got 3 main blood vessels, but there are actually 5. So we'll be learning about 5, but 2 of them are just smaller versions of arteries and veins. Okay. So let's have a look. So we've already talked a little bit about arteries and veins when we talked about our single and double circulatory system. Okay. So let's have a little look. So let's just refer to humans because I think that's easier. So we've got arteries here, which you can see look a little bit thicker. Capillaries look like they're our smallest ones, and veins are kind of more like an oval shape. So let's have a look at each one. Okay. So we've got our artery here. Okay, let me just get my little laser pen up as well. Okay, great. So we've got our artery here. We can see it's got quite a thick wall, hasn't it? Okay. And this middle bit, that's what we call a lumen. That's the gap in the middle. Okay. So we've got quite a thick wall, and we've got what we call a relatively small lumen. So relatively just to the wall. Oh, I think Sarah's joined. Let's see, she may have joined. Oh, I'm not sure. Okay. She may have joined. Okay. So we've got a relatively small lumen compared to the wall. So when you're talking about arteries, you don't say they've got a small lumen, you have to say they've got a relatively small lumen. So that means just in comparison. That's what relatively means. Okay. So we see on this diagram, it says they've got a thick muscle layer and a tough connective tissue. Okay. Hey, Sarah, are you okay? We're just talking about blood vessels and things. We've just done about open and closed circulatory systems and single loop and things like that. Okay, so you've not missed too much, don't worry. And it's not too difficult, so it's something we could go over maybe at another point. All right. So we're just talking about the different blood vessels. We've literally just started. All right, so relatively small lumen, thick wall, and we've got a thick muscular layer, tough connective tissue, and we've also got elastic fibers in the wall. Okay, so they're the 3 things we need to remember. You need to remember the muscle and the elastic fibers the most. The connective tissue, maybe not so much. Okay, so on the outside, we've got the endothelium. Okay, so that's just 1 cell thick of cells. That's just our cover on the outside. Okay. Okay, perfect. So we've got this thick muscular layer, all right? So arteries normally, there's one exception, they normally contain oxygenated blood, and they normally take away blood from the heart, okay? So there's one exception to having oxygenated blood, which we'll talk about later, but if you remember, normally have oxygenated blood, and they normally take blood away from the heart. That's what arteries do, okay? So they need this thick muscular layer for their purpose. What characteristics do you think the artery has because it's got this thick muscular layer? What do you think that helps? Does anyone know? Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at the chat. Okay, so high pressure, yeah. So we've got a few options here. So Sari, so you put carrying high pressure oxygenated blood. Yeah, that's a really good one. Okay. So it is, so arteries do carry high pressure oxygenated blood. Okay. But that's more to do with the elastic fibers about the high pressure. So we'll talk on about that. So what does muscle allow things to do? If you think of your muscle in your arm, what does muscle do? Yeah, perfect. Contracts. So it contracts. So the artery can contract and relax. It allows the artery to contract and relax. Okay. So that helps it keep the blood really nice high pressure. Okay. So if it's contracting, it's going to make that lumen even smaller. It's going to decrease the volume. And remember, when we decrease volume, we're increasing pressure. Okay. So it's going to help increase that blood pressure. That's what the main bit of the muscle layer is. Okay, so Sarah, you said about that the blood's already at high pressure. Okay, so we've got elastic fibers. What did we say the elastic fibers give us? Remember we talked about that they're in the alveoli. What are the two key words that we talked about when we talked about elastic fibers in the alveoli? Does anyone remember? Yeah, perfect. A couple of you put it. So stretch and recoil. They're the two key words you need to remember. Okay. Allow stretch and recoil. If you think, we'll talk about structure of the heart. If blood has just been pumped out of the heart, it's just been pumped, it's got that high pressure, it's going straight into the artery. It's going to be massive amounts of pressure. So every time the heart pumps, blood is going to be pushed into the artery. So every time the heart pumps, there's going to be a big increase in pressure. So one heart pump, increase, decrease. One heart pump, increase, decrease. So the artery is going to have to constantly stretch and recoil to allow that pressure. Otherwise, it's just going to rip, it's going to break, blood's going to go everywhere. And obviously, you'll die, won't you? You've not got your blood's just going into your body. Okay. So thick muscular layer that allows the lumen to decrease in size or increase in size, depending on what pressure we need in our arteries. Okay. And the stretch and recoil, the pressure that's come from our heart allows that, the elastic fibers allow that stretch and recoil. Okay. So it allows it to be quite flexible. That's what we talk about when we talk about arteries. Okay, great. We'll talk a little bit more about arteries and the different layers we've got a little bit later. Okay. We're just talking in general just at the moment. Okay. Perfect.
Miss, what did you say the thick muscular layer allows the lumen to what?
So it allows it to narrow and widen.
Okay,
yeah?
Thank you.
So if you think narrow, decrease in the volume, increase in the pressure, widen, increase in the volume, decrease in the pressure. Okay, so it helps maintain your blood pressure within your body. Okay. So next, it's not on this diagram, we've got like intermediate arteries. So what we have are these things called arterioles. So let me write these down here. Okay, so they're just kind of a smaller version of arterioles. Okay, I think I spelled that right. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so arterioles. So they're just a smaller version of the arteries. So let's just draw a really simple diagram of our lungs and our heart and go into the rest of our body. So we already did our double loop before, didn't we?